with that, I would really love to have each one of you tell us a bit more about your background. I'm always interested, of course, in educational path as an academic, but also your career path. Dr. Rafaeli, would you please go ahead and start?
Sure. Let me first thank you, Marcia, and thank Jefferson University for holding this event. Thank you all for attending, and thank all of you for arranging for the beautiful weather in the last 3 days that welcomed us in arrival here. The name is Sheizaf Rafaeli. I've been the president of Shenkar for the last year and a half, but very few people know this because Shenkar, like many other institutions, has become virtual. So only those people I met on Zoom, like Professor Tinsky and others, have actually encountered me, and we've begun to see students on campus in real only in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it is a wonderful feeling to be in person again. Background, I'm an Israeli. I was born and raised in Israel. I got my undergraduate education in Israel. I attended graduate school here in the States, both at Ohio State and at Stanford. My PhD is from Stanford. I was faculty at Stanford and then faculty at the University of Michigan on and off for about 25 years. I spent about 17 years at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and I've been for the previous 20 years at the University of Haifa. I also taught at the Technion, University of Tel Aviv, quite a few universities on 5 other continents. My field is computer-mediated communication. Some people say one of the greatest sinners in terms of sustainability and environmental responsibility, but others say also a source of great opportunity for future. Shenkar, if you want me to speak about Shenkar as well.
Please.
So let me say something. Shenkar was founded 52 years ago by the textile industry in Israel. It's a college that has its roots in industry, and it began mostly as a textile school. Several hundred students. We've grown to several thousand students and have also expanded into quite a few other fields. In addition to textile, for which we're known worldwide and about which this relationship is created, we also have a very much celebrated fashion school. We also have quite a few design departments in other areas like graphics design and industrial design. And we have a new faculty that deals with sciences, including industrial and engineering and management, including chemistry and plastics, and including software engineering fields. We're most proud of trying to pull all of those fields together. And so one of our greatest achievements in the last year has been creating a new program that melds industrial design with plastics. Again, suspected sinner in regards to sustainability and environment, but also in our labs, we do a lot of work on not biodegrading, but actually active degrading of plastics, which is a big area that people are interested in. The work that we do on new fabrics, on textile research, on the application of science and engineering to the design of new fabrics in everything from space to military, to day-to-day fashion, to construction, to other areas of application of textiles is the ground for collaborations, among which the collaborations we have here with Jefferson in Philadelphia, we're very proud of. We send our graduates abroad, and we have hundreds of graduates involved in all sorts of industries. We have research projects ongoing and new projects in the oven, and I'm delighted to be here to discuss more of these as we go along.
Thank you.
Great.
Craig.
Thanks. So I'll echo Sheizaf's gratitude to Jefferson University and to the folks at PICC for organizing this event today. I'm truly honored and privileged to have the opportunity to share the stage today with Mark and with Sheizaf. I'm Craig Lindemann, grew up just outside of Baltimore, so relatively local to the area here. Did my undergrad studies at Loyola College, and I think a lot of my career and a lot of my motivation has been influenced by my Jesuit education. And then I did a graduate program at the North Carolina State University. So I have a graduate degree in textile chemistry. Graduated there in 2007 and actually did a master's thesis on, at the time, novel short chain fluorocarbon and non-fluorinated DWR finishes. So I've been looking at environmentally preferable DWR solutions for pretty much my entire career at this point. After grad school, I worked at Under Armour for a number of years, working in textile development and design, and on their innovation team. So doing product development, performance evaluations, and setting up an innovation lab there. And I've been with Gore now for about 9 years. Thank you for the introduction and the attempt at an explanation. At Gore, we have a bit of complicated relationship with job titles, if you're familiar with the company culture at all. We like to say we have commitments, not jobs, and I've tried to embrace that in my career. So while being with Gore for 9 years now, I think I can say I've probably had 4 or 5 different what you would call job titles. I've worked in our consumer fabrics business in hunting and fishing. I was a new product development engineer for a while, working in our military business with the US military. I had a new business development opportunity where we were working on introducing new fibers or attempting to introduce new fibers to market. A lot of startups and a lot of new ventures fail, and this was one of them. And I've spent about the last 3 years now in our sustainability team in the fabrics division, looking at new technologies, and as Marcia was saying, have a new opportunity now to expand that outside of the walls of Gore, and looking for external technologies that we can bring in that could be complementary or somehow symbiotic with the materials that we produce. So we're a deep science and application engineering company, I think, at heart. And so now we're looking at ways we can apply that knowledge and experience to other materials.
Thank you. Fantastic. Mark.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marcia. So my history to where I am right now in this chair is sort of parlayed into different subsets, but the thread that runs through everything that I have done in my career has always been textiles. I started in the textile industry when I was 14. My dad was in the textile industry and the apparel retail business. I went to work in the factory and worked my way all the way through to logistics, even going back from school to the company. I graduated from Thomas Jefferson University, at that time, Philadelphia College of Textiles and Science. And I got my master's degree here at Thomas Jefferson University in textile engineering. I was recruited directly from, after graduation, well, before graduation, I was directly recruited into a company in Philadelphia where the 2 owners did not have a son or a daughter or any children in the business, and I became that person. I immediately took ownership into the company by the age of 22, and we ended up selling that business before I was age 30. So it was a very fortuitous event for me. And at that time, me and one of the other partners became consultants in the textile business for about 12 years until I came to Thomas Jefferson University in 2003. What's interesting about my Thomas Jefferson University experience is that I never envisioned myself in academia. I've always envisioned myself on the commercial side. How could I fit? What could I do? I could teach a course, yes, for sure. And I was tapped to teach a course by Professor Peg Gutman at an alumni event. And what was interesting about that is she tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Mark, I know you could teach this course and you have 2 weeks to prepare." And at that time, I didn't think too much of it. And I just started to, I started from polymers and I went all the way up to finish fabrics and garments. So that started my career. And then one course led to 2, and 2 led to 3, and 3 led to a full-time position in 7 and 8. But it was really my business background that got me into at Thomas Jefferson University into a full-time position as assistant dean. And from there, teaching was also part of my responsibility. So when I look back on it, and I had a chance to look back on it recently, that I've taught in those 17 years, 18, I can't really be sure. It doesn't really matter at the end because the relationship is ongoing. 236 courses or sections during that time. 54 industry-related research or projects. So when I look at that and I take the scope of what has been done and the interaction with students, and considering students and what we're doing here at Jefferson to be very strategic, inviting industry, having students be a part of it, it became much more of the culture from which I excelled in. So and then seeing those students go out and seeing those industry partners go out and seeing that success of what we did here in the classroom exhibit itself and transcend itself in industry was very rewarding. So in 2016-17, a group came to us as part of the cannabis and hemp industry, Ecofiber and Barry Lambert, and they set up a foundation here at Thomas Jefferson University to study the medical side of hemp and cannabis. At that time, Thomas Jefferson University and Philadelphia University were merging, and at that merge, we added on industrial hemp onto the grant. So I started to do some research. I was part of that. Dr. Ron Kandor was part of that, and Brian George, who was there, is also part of that, and Mike Leonard, the dean, supported that research as well. So we were very positioned to try to, push what we knew in textiles and try to bring the hemp industry and the industrial nature, how to bring hemp and textiles together. So, but in my mind, I was looking at hemp much differently because I had already knew what the fiber would and couldn't do. And I knew that the road to the fiber may not be as easy as one might imagine. And after doing some research, I started to look at other processes using hemp. And that became kind of the light bulb for me. So in 2017, early 18, we started to work with the biomass, the mass left behind by the hemp plant. And we started to carbonize that, create a carbon powder and a pigment. What the carbon pigment here is exhibited right here on this t-shirt, printed from hemp. So when we started to look at that, I saw unique properties, and one of the unique properties, one being conductivity, but also this area between conductivity and a pigment seemed very interesting to me. Like you had a whole host of other commercial products between what you could actually get into a fiber and what you then could do as conductivity. So that opened up a whole different market for me, and a way of and try to think about how we can get this unique material onto textiles. And the other was taking the full spectrum hemp extract oil and turning that into, what could we do with that to turn it into to add it to a polymer, add it to a nanospin material. And after some recent, after some research, we found out that we had antibacterial and antimicrobial properties based on that in a very green material. So sort of supplanting what metals could give us. In 2018, Hemp Black became 2019, Hemp Black became a commercial company as part of Ecofiber. Ecofiber is a publicly traded company. And Ecofiber's home office is headquartered in Georgetown, Kentucky, in a LEED Platinum certified building where Hemp Black materials are signature materials throughout the building. And imagine that in Georgetown, Kentucky, you don't get points for bicycling and bike racks. So 8 points out of 10 came from materials. And then in 2020, during the pandemic, of course, Hemp Black then acquired Tex Innovate, which is in Greensboro, North Carolina. So that is what Hemp Black is. That's where our polymers are made. That is where our yarns are made. We have 20 seamless knitting machines there, plus another 13 stole knitting machines. Plus we do a whole host of other fibers that don't even involve hemp. So as you can see, what had happened in the last 3 years has been very accelerated, and it all had to happen in a very short period of time. So, but what I really want to say is there's a lot of assets here. There's now up to 9 patents, and Ron Kandor is one of the 9. And I hate to say who has the other 8, but that's okay. We're very proud of that because that assets is left behind for Jefferson as well, as they are part of Hemp Black. But my heart truly remains and will always remain here at Thomas Jefferson University with Mark Tikaczynski and Ron Kandor supporting me through everything that I have done up to this point.
Thank you. That's a great synopsis of a busy, long career. And I appreciate that you started with the thread that runs through it. So I appreciate that it used a textile analogy and that you also brought a visual aid of the printed t-shirt. So thank you. Thank you all for sharing a bit about your backgrounds. I think it helps our audience to know more about who you are. So Sheizaf, my first question then is for you. You obviously have extensive experience in information systems and in computer mediated communication, which you've already spoken about, and perhaps that's somewhat in tension with sustainability. But in your role as president of Shenkar, obviously, again, a university with amazing, fantastic legacy in textiles, what do you see about how your research interests and how the legacy and the future of Shenkar intersect in terms of sustainability in textiles?
Maybe for us to talk about the future, we need to go back a little bit into the past. For those of you who are not familiar with Israel, Israel used to be, any trip across the country would be a trip across cotton fields. Cotton was one of the biggest sources of or things that agriculture worked with. Cotton is no longer visible in Israel. And in much the same way that the cotton plant that used to be so prevalent and so widely available, so widely recognizable. When we were students, almost every student dorm room was decorated with a cotton branch. If you show a cotton branch to one of my sons, they wouldn't know what it's about. Cotton fields have gone away, as has much of the textile industry, following less expensive labor and other sort of global developments. In much the same way, one can write the history of sustainability. My generation, growing up as a child in the late 50s and early 60s of the 20th century, in Israel, the big thing was becoming aware of nature preservation. Nature preservation was suddenly all the rage. It was something that we in the youth movement were involved in and so forth. At the same time and in parallel, there were some major nature interventions that took place. The big forestation projects in Israel, building forests around the country and draining out some of the swamps in the north of the country and irrigating the south of the country and desalinizing the water throughout the country were all big interventions into nature. Some of these actually turned out to be mistakes. So for example, in the forestation effort, much of the country was covered by pine trees, something that we now bemoan because the pine trees can burn very quickly, and we've had a spate of fires almost reminiscent of California fires. Some of the swamps that were dried have now been reversed back into swamp condition, in part because they're very attractive bird sanctuaries, and in part because there are some ecological effects of that draining that people now regret. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is that sustainability and ecology responsibilities and so forth are sinusoidal in development. They emerge and they change and they shift. And that's, I think, part of our job as a research and teaching institution, to not just promote a particular single mode message, but to study these things, to think about sustainability from the point of view of recycling, and also think about sustainability from the point of view of biodegrading. Think about sustainability from the point of view of public education, and think about it from the point of view of developing new ideas and new tools and new industry. We've been looking at the business opportunities brought about by this responsibility, sustainability. You mentioned green masks. There's a green mask developed at Shenkar that just received a certification of 99% efficiency in blocking the viruses. And we're very proud of that. But it is an artificial mask. So we're now thinking about how to do it with biodegradable materials. The connection to computer-mediated communication and online and information systems is obvious, first, because we've all, over the last 18 months, moved online. Education has moved online, family life has moved online, entertainment has moved online, friendship has moved online, and everything that we've been talking about as a vision of the future is suddenly a vision of the present. And I think in much the same way, sustainability is transitioning from a vision of the future to a vision of the present. And I'm just placing a warning sign. The vision of the future is likely to undergo changes. Remember the pine forests that we now maybe are looking to replace. Remember our relationship to water before desalination, after desalination. Remember our attempts to deal with swamps one way or the reverse way. The important thing is that we are developing and educating a new generation that cares. And it's the care that we place the greatest emphasis on, followed closely by the skills and knowledge, curiosity that would make this care contribute to all of us.
I appreciate you raising both the idea of care and also curiosity, because as you were saying that, I was thinking one of our jobs as educators is to help our students become curious individuals and to always be looking forward. So Craig, as a self-described textile junkie and feeding off what Sheizaf has just shared with his thoughts about the fact that sustainability it's merging, it's changing, it's shifting. How do you see your background in textile chemistry and your research interests impacting your view of sustainability at Gore?
Great question. And let me build off of something that Sheizaf has shared, right? I think that there's a reality that we're entering a time where the idea of sustainability and the way we approach sustainability is really complicated. The easy answers are things we're already doing, right? Recycling polyester and using recycled polyester is easy. Organic cotton is relatively easy. But as you said, right, that many of the things that we think of as the big sinners are also providing tremendous value. And at Gore, our view of sustainability and the way we approach sustainability is that we say that we want the value of our innovations as an enterprise to be greater than the impacts that we have on people and the planet. So, we're a material science company. I mentioned in my introduction that my background, I first did my undergrad at Loyola College. And I think that one of the threads that runs through my career has been an ability to translate, to work across different areas of study and different areas of expertise, to work with fashion designers and material chemists, and to work across our supply chain partnerships and build kind of global networks. So that's been really, really helpful to me, right? And it's a way of thinking about the world where we have to look at this systematically. And many of the things that we do to try and improve the world, sometimes we find out that they have negative consequences. And we try to anticipate them as best we can, but we aren't always great at that, right? The future is always changing. And so I think that, the best we can do, as you said, is be curious and learn and try our best to do things that are adding value to the world. And I'll really probably butcher and paraphrase a quote from our founder. So Gore is now a third generation family-owned enterprise. Our current CEO is the grandson of our two founders, Bill and Viv Gore. And Bill talked about when he founded the company, his belief that the material that he was working with, which our company is built on, PTFE, and we can talk more about that later maybe. He believed that it held great potential to contribute value to society, and that through the enterprise that he was building and through the people that he was hiring, our mission as an enterprise was to take that material and find valuable ways to apply it in the world. And I think as we're learning more and as we're assessing that, we're always focused on how our products can add value. And I think that's one thing that makes Gore pretty unique is every single product we make, it does what we say it does. And we are absolutely convinced of the value that we're providing. We don't make products just to make them. We're not a company that is interested in kind of telling a story or making a new widget that we think we can sell a lot of just for the sake of making money, right? We make money because we think that the things that we're doing provide value. And so that's sort of our approach to sustainability. And I think, that idea of curiosity and care, I think really runs through that as well.
And as I'm standing here, I'm thinking about both curiosity and care, and knowing that we see that certainly in our students, and I see that in my colleagues, in faculty, in the administration. I wonder if the presence of those ideas is more prevalent now in this, I'd love to call it a post-pandemic society. I know we're still there. But I do wonder if we're seeing more of that now, if people are really thinking more about authenticity and about overall wellness, not just individual wellness, but also from a societal standpoint, because of what we've been through in the last year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say I would need to see the data on that, as one might say. We see the visual, right? The change, the thought process change. But, do we see the data that people are trying to do, want to do, thinking about doing, may do, may not do the right thing, right? And I think that is that's where we are right now, right? We have very distinct lanes and choices that we can actually make when it comes to sustainability. We can choose to do this, and we can choose to do that, and we can choose not to do this, and we can choose not to do that. So it really becomes, and of course, it's the underlying, platform for that is that we have a genuine systems problem in sustainability. We have lots of people out there who can install carpeting, but we don't have lots of people out there who can pick up this carpeting and recycle it. Right? So we have to be able to create that value. We have to create that business, right? That business has to exist. So, and I just bring that up because of the carpet question. But I think overall, by the time, we're actually talking about sustainability. 7 years ago, we were talking more about smart textiles, right? And then
Absolutely.
Apple Watch then put everything on the watch, and then we said, maybe something's different now, right? So sustainability is going to continue to live, and it's going to continue to be a platform for which different things will come out of it. I mean, I am very positive. I know that even in our own company, we can create a totally recycled material. But after somebody uses it, where does it go? In the recycle bin? Who's recycled bin? We barely can recycle ones and twos, right? So who's doing that? What bin does it go into? How does that happen? We can feel good about doing that, but at the end of the day, we have to create a system that creates value, that pays people, right? That creates an industry in which recycling and reclaiming can take place. So, at Hemp Black, one of the first questions I wanted to answer for myself was, can Hemp Black's first product be sustainability amongst anything else? Before patents, before anything that had happened, can sustainability really come through? Could it be a first product? And we all know about the benefits of hemp, growing it, less water, less insecticides, which we are doing, all those things in the farm to the field, comparing it to cotton. We have so much analysis and data. So then when I say, show me the data, we do have the data. But transporting hemp is a problem because it's so light. You got to transport it on trucks that could carry 4 times as much weight, right? So, now we're using barges up the Mississippi, right? As opposed to driving it across land. But, it was about, can sustainability be a product that brings value, right? And not an add-on, right? Not a thought process. And most times when you're in industry and you say, hey, can you give me a greener material? All of a sudden you're paying a surcharge. Why? Sustainability should be part of the product price, right? So, when we put all the data together and we were able to test our biochar, and we ended up getting the first platinum certified cradle to cradle badge for our carbon, then I thought to myself, wow, everything that we did in the beginning, with genetics to growing to farm to soil management to biochar to the actual product, is for real, right? So that char that you see on this t-shirt comes from a platinum graded biochar, right? That has its roots here at Thomas Jefferson. So in a quick story, I'm working with a brand who wants to use our ink, and they want to print it on their t-shirts. So our metric for our ink is very sustainable, from water-based binders to the actual char itself. And yet they were printing it on a t-shirt that was so not sustainable. It was it's right. It was so hard for me to, so we decided that we weren't going to sell the ink to that company because I think the platform had an opportunity, right, to be on the right product, on the right material, in the right venue, right? Why does it need to be in that format? So I think it's about every time it's a little change, or every time we can talk about it, or every time the three of us and Marsha for sure, obviously, can talk about sustainability and drive it home and be a part of the student experience, is going to be much better off for our future, right? So, when I look at this carpet, I think of like so many things, like what can I take from this building that actually I could use again, right? And then when I look at this carpet, I break it down. I mean, this carpet is probably made from 5 or 6 different layers of materials. Like, why just look at the top material? Why can't I just recycle the top? Why can't I just pull off the top of this carpet and leave the rest behind and recycle the top? Right. So it becomes that's kind of my little rant on sustainability, but it should be a product for which all of us embrace. It shouldn't be a surcharge, and it really should not be something that is dismissed in any way, because there's so many opportunities across the supply chain where everybody can make a difference.
Yeah. And I think, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just wanted a shortened sentence. Your point was that sustainability should be a product that creates value rather than costs more. And as an educator, my thought is sustainability should be the value.
Yes.
It's what we need to inculcate and educate about. And that's what we place our emphasis on. Just to say that we build our educational innovation programs around the idea of not just teaching things, but teaching opportunities to make use of these skills and pieces of knowledge for these values. And so if the value is at the center, even the next generation in 10 years is going to be able to pick it up and ask sorts of questions that you ask about carpets to ask about the next generation.
Exactly. And that's really what it has to be I hate to use the word organic, but it has to be as organic as that, right?
Yeah.
Right. It can't be a subset of the conversation, or let's try to use recycled materials. It has to, at the end of the day, I think the education of students in sustainability has to be as part of the research and the product and what they are working on, right? It's not a +1. It's no longer a +1.
Yeah, and I think, to that end, right, value and the idea of value is really centered in what we're able to measure. Right? I mean, yeah, we have qualitative values, but it's very difficult, right? We very often translate that idea of value into dollars, right? And that's a reflection of what we're able to measure. And I think one of the things that I see that I'm really excited about in the industry changing is us measuring some of the costs more accurately, the costs of the production that we undertake. And so being able to measure those things, report against them, be open with them, and look for solutions to them, I think is a way to help us be more real about the value that we are both producing and the costs of producing those values. And I think the other thing that you said, Mark, that I wanted to comment on is, recycling is super important. And I think the idea of circularity, right, is starting to take off, starting to gain traction. But to us, right, I think circularity is a part of the solution, right? It's not the solution. One of the things that concerns me is people talking about circularity and the circular economy and endless recyclability as a way to allow us to continue patterns of consumption that are quite simply unsustainable. And so, when we look at it, we take pride in making really durable products. And one of the things that we try to emphasize when we engage in these conversations about sustainability is the value of durability, the value of making a product that you can wear and use and will last a long time, so that we can slow the rate of consumption, right? When we talk about system problems, rates are hugely important, right? So figuring out how to slow down, how to make products that people are going to love and value and purchase and wear for a long time and have meaning, I think is really, really important to this journey that the industry is on, and that the broader society is on. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, as with a specialization in what is it, computer mediated communication, right? And how do we use that capability to, enhance this dialogue around the values of the products that we're making and buying?
I'll add a part B to that, because sustainability, if we look at it 5 or 6 years ago, it was sort of an emotional response, right? But we are now, when I said show me the data, it's really that we are in this now, this computational stage of sustainability, right? How does it all add up, and how is it the value, right? And I think it's a very important point that, the data is really, the data-driven sustainability values is really what is really how I can prove it to you, right?
So if you put aside the question of energy that is required for all of this additional computing and calculation and so forth, and that's an entirely different conversation that we should get into. But
when we talk about carbon neutrality, right? When we talk about carbon neutral, then we'll talk about.
But if we can put that aside for a second, then the computation component of just about everything is exploded. And if we're interested in reducing consumption, especially conspicuous and unnecessary consumption, and if we're looking at more long-term things, then this trend away from the tangible to the representation, which is what computation really is about. It's where bits replace atoms in more and more fields of life. That's where the exciting part of research and development can take place. It's where the exciting, I think, future of new textiles and new sustainability and new recycling and education can take place. If we can do less travel and more imagining over computer-mediated networks, if we can do less actual buying and more vicarious enjoyment of things, if we can make use of the collections of what we already have in the back drawers of our closets just by counting them right and organizing them right and putting them together right, if we can do more exchanges of used materials in all sorts of ways. And of course, if we can accelerate research through the access to knowledge and research findings through accessing these things over networks, then we're stepping into a new kind of era. This requires a shift. Old style education, especially in the fields of textile and other material science, was very hands-on. Very be in the lab and touch it. And this is true for other disciplines as well. It's true for medicine, it's true for and so forth. The pandemic forced us into thinking about how many of these things that used to be physical can be replaced by the virtual, and discover less commuting, hopefully, as an example, or discover less spending times in traffic jams, maybe discover more purposeful search for information. Those are the areas in which, if you can do better measurement of body sizes, if you can do better fitting of whatever it is that people purchase or buy or wear, so forth, if you can do more conversation as opposed to commuting, then we've made a big step ahead.
And that's a fantastic comment for us to pause on for just a moment. We'd love to take questions from the audience, both virtually and in person. I have a whole list of additional questions, but I'd love to open it up to the audience. Dr. Tikaczynski.
Great. It's always great to ask questions in a field that I know nothing about. But let me start with sort of a notion of how do you drive utilization of the kind of materials and textiles that you want them to. And I think we tend to rely on individual consumer doing what is right. And so we also would then rely on forcing them to use things we want them to use and what is made available. But I think another sort of domain that we could probe is influencing what the individual demands. And one way to do that is through this notion of personalization, right? Hemp, black, the hemp may be right for me, but not for the other person, depending on my skin sensitivity and all sorts of things. If we make materials and increasingly personalize the materials that we use, the textiles that we use, they're less likely to then go and discard that. And I think the personalization, of course, is in the materiality. There's personalization in the sizing, as we just heard, and in a number of other things. So, and I think that would then get us to one of the things we want to do, which is to decrease consumption. So I just wanted to maybe get you to react to this notion of personalization. Of course, the business model that goes with it becomes far more, challenging.
I mean, I'll take that. It seems like a softball question for me, but no, I mean, Mark, you're right. I mean, so I just want to say the business model certainly can be built. Personalization is, you take 300 billion Americans and you want to personalize every one of something that they wear. It seems kind of an arduous task, and it seems at first sight in 2021 that it might lead to more waste than not. Right? Because that means like every first time you try to get it on that person and the iterations that you need to go through in order to get it on a 3D form does take time. I mean, you could waste 5 or 6 times more. So I don't think that we're there yet. But speaking for myself, personalization to a specific product or a group of products became very, very important, right? So like Mark said about hemp and skin sensitivity, but nothing I have on my body. I'm wearing all hemp black articles, by the way, my pants and my shirt. You wouldn't even know that they were made from hemp or came from hemp or came from CBD, other than it has anti-odor properties. So it was very much about getting the technology, personalizing technology, and get it into the commercial supply chain as quickly as possible, right? So personalizing those materials for different purposes and different end uses then became the paramount existence of hemp black, right? Like my pockets are antibacterial, made from CBD and copper and recycled polyester. I would never have thought that, 5 years ago. So personalization is really a platform that allows us to take our materials, 3D knit it in a way that uses no cutting and sewing and no waste, and can personalize sizes to each individual. And also, that's all part of the platform, is to take those advanced high performance materials. How do you turn them into a product and make them personal for an individual customer, driving that experience through performance and fashion, right? Without having to make a whole bunch of waste, a whole bunch of product. So if I'm making these pants on a 3D knitted seamless machine, I could make one for you and one for you and one for you and one for you once the computational values were there to measure those people. So I want to say that, yeah, you see, hundreds of thousands of yards, and how can I cutting and sewing and the arduous amount of labor that goes into making a product, but individualization is here, right? I mean, that's, and I know at Sitka, I mean, individual, that part of the business from the Gore side is very much prominent, right now.
And Craig, do you want to comment on that? What's Gore's perspective on looking at personalization of materials?
Yeah, so I think I'd maybe challenge the idea of personalization a little bit, right? And to me, it's more about customization and curation. If personalization is a way to slow consumption and to buy things that we're going to keep and last, fantastic. I haven't seen data that supports that notion. I myself, I can tell you that, during the pandemic, I've gained and lost weight several times. And so, a personalized garment produced for me today might not fit me in 6 months, right? And I think fit is a huge challenge that we have in the industry. And I think one of the biggest sources of waste is what's in my closet unworn. Right? When you think about autonomous vehicles and that sort of thing, right? A lot of people talk about the amount of time a car sits parked in the driveway, right? As underutilization of that resource. I look at clothes the same way, right? The things I'm not wearing are hugely impactful, right? That's an enormous source of waste. And those resources just sitting there. I think, looking at things like secondhand exchanges, companies like ThreadUp, like Rent the Runway, who are producing, giving us the ability to customize our experience, right? So it's not personalized for me permanently. It's personalized for me on the day of use, We're experimenting with a rental program. We're working with a number of ski resorts right now to put Gore-Tex products in rental shops so that people who are new to skiing or traveling out to Colorado or wherever have the opportunity to, use for a day high quality, top of the line skiing equipment and have the best possible experience for that day on the mountain. And by having it in a rental program, right? If that person bought that jacket or that pair of ski bibs from REI or wherever, they might wear it twice, maybe twice a year if we're lucky, but maybe twice ever, and take it home and put it in their closet, right? And here we're able to, produce these things and have them worn 50 days, 100 days during a ski season by different people every day. And I think that's, how we're approaching it is how do we, because we're focused on durability, because we're focused on reducing consumption, how do we utilize that in a way that is focused on increasing utility, making products that are more versatile, that are used more frequently, and using that to change the way we generate value and deliver that.
Thank you. Would you like to add a comment, Sheizaf?
Just to say that in terms of softball questions, this is the softest of all for me because I am from e-commerce and computer mediated stuff. And of course, the impact of e-commerce on supply chain structures and the way the whole management of stocks can be impacted for the better of everyone is pretty obvious. Eliminating the whiplash effects and so forth that are endemic to supply chains is something that computer networks are at least promising to do. Whether they actually end up doing this or that personalization would end up with more consumption is something we'll have to see data about.
I have can I ask a question?
You can, and then we have one from
Please.
our virtual
Okay,
audience.
all right, very good, very good. But let's think about the consumer, right, for a second, and how are they going to, because they're the end of the line, and then how do they turn the loop back around again? Okay, so I think in the short term, isn't it more right now? It's such the responsibility of academics and industry to get it right.
Absolutely.
Right. So then when it gets to the customer, we know it's right. And then we'll educate the customer sometime in the not so distant future. Right. Because we can't rely on the customer right now. I mean, I'm not saying that the human element is unreliable in that respect, but at the end of the day, we have, as industry and as educators, we have a much more golden opportunity to affect a greater population and then turn out a sustainable product or mission or thought process. And then that in turn will then trickle down to the customer.
We need to listen to the customers, but we certainly have no right to shirk the responsibility for setting goals and directions and so forth. Values have always been inculcated in thinking circles, whether it's scholars or religious leaders or researchers. And that's what we're here for. That's why the public funds institutions of public and private education and research. And absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that leads brilliantly into the question that we have, listening to the customers. So the question is, have you conducted any studies on the premium that customers are willing to pay for sustainable textiles? Is there a difference from country to country or product to product?
I'm not aware of any research that we've done. I'll jump in first. I'm not aware of research that we've done directly, but we're certainly, I'll say, customers of a great deal of market research. And what I've seen is very little evidence that people are willing to pay more for sustainability. I think there's a number of reasons for that. What I do think that the evidence seems to be indicating is that given a sustainable option and a non-sustainable option at the same price, consumers are increasingly willing to buy the sustainable option, right? All else being equal. And so I think it is a point of sale or a point of differentiation. Whether that translates into a value assessment, I think is still up for grabs, and I think it's shifting.
Right.
And I think, the other thing that it's incumbent on us as industry and as educators and as, companies to do a better job of informing consumers. I think there's a lot of confusion, right? And a lot of greenwashing happening in the industry, very candidly, right? Everyone loves a story to tell, and every brand tries to tell a story. And a lot of times when those stories conflict, right, consumers don't know what to do with it. The people who are in the store making those purchase decisions just don't have the information they need to make a decision. So they make a decision with the information they have, right? That's what we all do. And so the better we can be at being consistent in how we tell those stories. One of my concerns for the industry is that as we focused on sustainability more and more in the last, I'll say, decade, I've seen the idea of sustainability turn from something that is collaborative and cooperative and what you might call pre-competitive to something that companies are now using to compete. And that worries me a little bit, to be honest, right? It's when it becomes a point of differentiation, when it's, my sustainability is better than your sustainability. I think that's a slippery slope and a really dangerous place to be.
Right. I mean, being so customer facing, I have to say that customers will not pay more, right? We have the data that the customers will not pay more. We are presently selling on Amazon 2 platforms. We are selling on the climate change platform as well. So customers do have a choice to buy one product not on the climate change platform and another product on the climate change platform, but basically the prices are the same, right? So it is we want to think that the customer will pay more and it's a value add, but it's not. It's a value to actually selling the existing product at an existing price at the same price. Right. So it's not.
That's not easy.
And no. And as far as different countries are concerned, the EU is much more stringent when it comes to sustainability and green materials and certifications and badges. Much more stringent. So products that I have tested, we have tested in the EU because we know when we bring them back here, we know that they will pass. So the US happens to have some of the most lenient, restrictions, but the EU, I mean, you work globally, you probably have known this. But yeah, I mean, it goes back to the first statement. We can't just make it, it's just not, it has to be part of the product already. It has to be made part of the product. The customer has to see that it's part of the product, but nobody's going to pay, nobody's going to pay $100 for a pair of yoga pants when they can get the same ones for 50, even though the ones for 100 were more sustainable.
Right.
If I said seamless knitting, would that make a difference for you? Right? Probably not.
Yeah.
Right. So it all has to be part of the platform for the customer and the pricing.
So I have very little data about this and certainly very little data about anything beyond Israel, but I do have one observation that I have data to back up, and that is that sustainability awareness and willingness to pay is actually much, much stronger the younger the person. Mm-hmm. The educational systems have been successful in educating sustainability awareness and even intentions to buy. Problem is most kids don't make the decisions about buying. And the younger you are, the further you are from the decision point about what it is you will buy. So there might be some good news for the distant future. And at this point, much of our efforts in educating are probably not registering at the cash register yet, right, because it is young people.
Right.
Excellent point.
But I see your, the point is there that they are seeking out sustainable options, mm-hmm, but whether they spend an extra 50% more or 20% more is still, the data is not there to support that.
Well, and clearly this is a topic that resonates, that's incredibly timely, that we could talk about solidly for the rest of the afternoon, but our time is essentially up. So with that, I very much want to thank all of our guests, Sheizaf Rafaeli from Shenkar, Craig Lindemann from W.L. Gore, and Mark Sunderland from Hemp Black. Thank you so much for a fascinating discussion. And I look at it as part of the continuum. This is an ongoing conversation. So
yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you so much, Marcia Weiss. You did an amazing job moderating this panel. I think this would be probably one of future programs that we will host, and there's so much that we haven't even touched. And and I think that the next program may be a combination of fashion, textile, fashion tech, and textile design and sustainability, because Israel is developing technologies to help fit your clothing and such that you could possibly do biodegradable, fitted, timely fashion, which you, I guess, need just for that specific person. I would like to once again welcome Professor Sheizaf to Rafaeli to our region. This region has a long legacy of textile manufacturing, innovation, smart fabrics innovation, as well as in Israel. So to have such wonderful ties with Shenkar and Jefferson and other institutes and the PICC is fantastic. We had the pleasure of taking delegations to Shenkar in the past several years before the pandemic. And we will look forward to coming out of this pandemic and bringing more delegations to collaborate with you.
Absolutely. Here's an open invitation to all of you. We would love to see you at Shenkar and in the country.
One more thing that I have to add, if any of you innovate in this industry or others, we represent the BIRD Foundation, U.S. Israel Binational Industrial R&D Foundation, in short, it's BIRD. And you can win up to $1 million per project if you collaborate with, collaboration between an Israeli and American partners. And it includes sustainability, textile design, and many, many other things. So please reach out to us or attend our program on November 10. And this will be a virtual program. So you can all learn how you can leverage on this money. Please do so. So thank you, everybody. Again, Jefferson for hosting and all of you for attending on the virtual or local. So thank you so much.
Thank you.